Welcome and hello from this long-lost Italian palace in Italy. Lost and almost forgotten, but today we intend to change that. This video has been a long time in the making, as I have carved out an immersive walkthrough experience of this majestic space, seen by millions of people across the world. But going back to how it was when we first arrived, of course all that was really needed was a deep clean. The bones of the structure were truly incredible, and the total number of archways between the loggia and the veranda on the inside totaled 9. So the sense of light once those windows were cleaned was just an incredible transformation. And so let's begin this deep dive. And here we are already at the present day, and we're going to be backing away now from the kitchen that we saw in the last episode at the far end and move through these archways and vaults, each of which are framed by these incredible gesso detailings. And they would have once had these gorgeous open lanterns hanging from each of these rosettes. And this is just one of the many lost details that we'll be able to discover today thanks to the auction book, which showcased how this place was in its prime. Reaching now the middle section of the veranda, you can see the architectural harmony of those arched windows communicating with these internal glass doorways. And once they were cleaned up, the way in which the light passes through both of these thresholds is something that's truly magical. But it's reaching the one section of the veranda which doesn't have these glass doorways where the true intrigue of this space begins. And we discover the location of these two lost artworks that shows the palace as it once was, so much so that you can even see the outlines of where they once sat, even to this very day. And it really took me far too long in the editing suite to recreate this live action composite of how these artworks sat in the space, but I'm so glad I did because it conveys just how much life it brings. And while other aspects of the veranda remain rich in architectural character, this space feels particularly vacant, and the loss of these artworks are part of the legacy which are going to take quite some time to recover. Now, this Salottino set of furnitures that you see here, we were able to pick up for an absolute steal, collectively around €100 thanks to Facebook Marketplace. And we got these in homage to what came before. Doing a deeper dive into this catalogue that we found, we see that there were richly decorated console tables with inlaid marble, wonderfully gilded appliques that would have sat along the walls, and these lovely banquettes with varying types of upholstery, all of course encased within wonderful woodwork and scrolling motifs. And one particular piece that I'm very proud of that we found recently that is very similar to this style is a divanetto, which is now sitting in the atrium of the stairwell, which I love not only because it's a callback to honoring the past, but also because the upholstery is in particularly good condition and just the sort of style that I would do if doing it from scratch. Really nice inspiration for these pieces, which of course now need a new lease of life, with fabrics that can help bring it into a new contemporary sort of living. That's going to be its own video sometime down the road, but what I really enjoy are these wood motifs, which are just something you don't see anymore and you can only really find by buying antique. And it fits into a whole ecosystem that you can then build out from that. And while at the moment we're holding our finger to the wind of how exactly the layout will pan out for this space, ideas down below please, we can at least begin to build the aesthetic which honours what came before, all while of course interweaving our own style so we don't fall into that trap of living in a museum. And this is what's so important about looking into the past, to gaze but not be transfixed by it, otherwise we'd be lost into melancholy, and to instead be grateful that we have this companion to guide us, and for this it warms my heart. And talking about books that are close to my heart, let's take a look at our latest coffee table centerpiece. The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization. Book publisher Hungry Minds saw how we're rebuilding our lost world in this little corner of Italy and offered to sponsor today's video. And I'm genuinely so excited to share the highly detailed old world aesthetic of this book, making it an insatiable page turner. We've come a long way as a civilization, and throwing everything we have into saving this old palazzo is a constant reminder of that. But do you ever wonder how it actually works? Like the most ancient part of our estate, the well? Or our upcoming grand desire to restore the greenhouse to its former glory. But of course, there's so much more to learn about each of these things than you'd ever think. This book makes being the most interesting person in the room a fun and effortless pursuit, especially thanks to the hidden puzzles found throughout the book that, if solved, can unlock some special prizes. Now, the Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization sits pride of place on our coffee table. And if you'd like the same for yours too, scan this QR code or click the link below. Returning now to our own little corner of civilization we're attempting to rebuild, there's so many more details to unpack, like these empty niches that are found at both ends of the veranda. And we happen to be fortunate enough to have once lived in Florence right next to this astonishing gesso studio, where they created all of these both classical and also modern busts and statues. So of course we simply must go back, and let me know down below if you'd like me to take you along with me in a future video. But before we arrive at the terraced loggia at the end, I'm taking you now cross-sectionally through this space and out these giant arched windows so we can explore the exterior, which really has so much of its own story to tell. There's quite a few sumptuous details to unpick here, so let's start with the frescoing, which takes place mostly underneath but also around each of the archways, creating a sense of architectural depth to each of these openings. Now, I can only imagine what the sense of light will be once these trees are pruned somewhat, because it's very suffused at the moment. But of course, the overgrowth is an element of beauty in its own right. And these wrought iron flower beds are something that allows us to think of how we can bring our own touch of floral class to each of these spaces in future. Curiously, the veranda is actually sandwiched between a lower floor and a sunset terrace above, and this is quite typical because of course the piano nobile, or the noble floor, is always raised within traditional Italian architecture. The sunset terrace above, it gives you a glimpse of what the light exposure could one day be, as we're just starting to peek above the trees, and of course there are grand sweeping views to be revealed even beyond that. But of course, these master builders that built this place weren't satisfied with just the veranda. They continued their genius into an exterior space called a loggia, something also typically found originally in Florence. And this is a colonnaded, vaulted, and covered external terrace. And as we back out into it, the metamorphosis is almost mesmerizing. We do have a solitary image of how this was once furnished, and this does feel like this was perhaps one of those spaces that became an afterthought from the inhabitants that last graced these halls. And for us, the furnishing will likely be just as simple. But the astonishing thing is how, with such a simple clean, we're already transported back to the original state in which the photography was taken. And this place was one of those early transformations which betrayed a sense of ease that actually, upon closer inspection, the fight against the decay was present even here, as shown by this collapsed antenna dangling along the side of the building. And this reveals a more dangerous part of the overgrowth, so close to the perimeter of the palace, with these heavy, intruding branches surely being responsible for dislodging it in the first place. So not only do we need to find time and resources for clearing this view, not only for restoring the original design of the vista, but we also pare back the risk of collapse, of falling trees, and in the event of future violent storms that will inevitably pass through. The drama of Italy never ends after all. that the risk of breakages to windows and ornamentation is reduced as much as possible. And with that, the tour may be complete, but I wanted now to take some moments to walk through this space with you, because understanding a place like this isn't just a presentation, it's a discussion. And I wanted to share a few thoughts that I'd love to hear your thoughts on too down below. It's really incredible. You can see the outlines of the two pieces. And I think one thing that doesn't really translate onto camera is just how large they are. The marking takes up probably 40% of the entire height, sort of on the upper third where it's located. But considering that the height of these ceilings are above 5 meters, approaching 6 actually at the apex of the vault, then it indicates just how huge these were. I think if they were brought down, including the frame, it would probably be up to my eyebrow, to eye level. So almost human height. The size of it is part of what makes it feel like such a loss, because of course not only was it an artwork that was made for this space, it wouldn't have sense or meaning placed anywhere else. But also the size of it means that any sort of reproduction is going to be a really Herculean task. I mean, everything we're taking on here is exactly that, but it is something to wrestle with. It's not something that we can simply take a high-res version of the photo and sort of blow it up, because even though the photo quality that we do have from when the auction took place is very good, it will still remain pixelated when blown up to restore the original monumental size of the canvas. So it's not only the artwork that we need to strive to restore, but also the size. Another feature that I can't help but adore are these inbuilt shutters that slot within each of these columns so that they're perfectly flush when closed. And of course we can also notice here the discoloration of old water infiltration in these two aspects of the far end arches. The degradation is worse, slightly also on that far wall there. Everywhere else the paint is in perfect condition and just suffers from a few hairline fractures. But in terms of repainting, we intend to keep the color exactly as it is, and we'll just be color matching and refreshing it as soon as we get approval. And the interesting part with that, of course, is we have to do some artistic surveys beneath this latest paint layer to make sure that there are no hidden grander frescoes underneath that would need to be restored as a part of our contribution to bringing the artistic value of this palace back up to what it possibly could be. And so once we can confirm that there are no lost artworks hiding, then we will be given free range to repaint it in any way that we want. But we basically just want to recreate it exactly as is, and maybe even discovering a technique in order to retain the sort of gentle patina of the paint, so the color application is not so matte and sort of uniform. All this just to then ultimately be able to remove these old water infiltration stains and make it feel like this place is restored back to a level of grandeur that it truly deserves to have. And a final curiosity to note are these vents that you find along all of the columns, not only on this side, but on this side too. And from what we've been able to understand, this was part of a much older heating system with the old sort of gasoline powered boiler down in the basement, which is still there. It's absolutely enormous. It's almost like something out of a movie. Of course, it doesn't function anymore. And I wonder about the efficacy of that system, because at a later date, they inserted these radiators between most of these archways. For us, both of these systems are now defunct and not the latest way in which to temperature control space in an energy efficient way. And instead, we will be using these same cavities that go down to the technical rooms in the basement to actually install some wall-mounted radiator-style air conditioning units for both heating and cooling. And the great thing about this system is that it relies on something called a heat pump, making it anywhere between 3 to 5 times more energy efficient than a regular boiler that would be heating up radiators. The goal, therefore, would be to replace these slightly clumsily placed radiators with a few of these more modern systems that we want to put in, and then to encase them in some sort of elegant wooden framing, maybe with some metal work as well, so they completely melt into the respective archways in which they're placed. And if anything, they provide additional shelf space for us to decorate some of these more empty parts of the veranda. It's a lot to take in, and I hope I didn't overwhelm you guys with this first deep dive. But I so enjoy sharing even the small details of the history and restoration as we gradually make it into a home. Share your thoughts with our growing community down below, and help us grow it too by giving us a like and spreading word of this channel, so that this little corner of Italy can thrive once more with life